between, say, Taylor Swift, she's not even a good example. I mean, like, I suppose, like, Britney Spears and the consumption of Oreo cookies is the same. that its meaning is the same. But I don't believe that. Okay? I've never believed that. To me, pop culture is just popular culture. It is the culture that is popular. I really stick to the strict definition of this. So that's like the music, the film, the sports, the religion, the news, all of these things that people use to understand their own life. Okay? It's sort of the soundtrack for your existence is popular culture. And I think it's a very important question to ask, why do you like these things? Why do these things matter? And why is the fact that, Metallica and Megadeth, some ways they're similar. If one band is hugely successful, the other is successful. Why is that? I think there's some key questions you can ask about these things that tell us a lot about human nature. I always think to myself, we listen to a song on the radio, or listen to a song on the CD, and you like it or you don't like it, right? You'd like to believe that you're having a one-to-one relationship with that art. That if you like this Justin Timberlake song or whatever, it's because of the way the song, the lyrics, and that's not really what's happening. I feel what's happening is that people now have a larger cultural memory. What they're doing when they hear a song is they're taking all of the experiences they've had in their life, all the books they've read, all the songs they've heard, the very specific incidents that happened to them when they were in 7th grade, all these things. They're injecting that into the song, and they're hearing back something that's new. And I'm really interested in that process. Interested in how certain media affect our appreciation of other media that don't seem related. From there, I'm like, does anybody have any, I really prefer the question. Does anybody have any questions to start with? I hope people are going to ask questions. Anything people are interested in me talking about? Okay, up there.
Shout out. Shout out. It's always somebody with 16 rows up.
Okay. I'm 44. My son's 24.
Okay.
I burned him his first Nirvana CDs. He loads my iPod with Explosions in the Sky. Now, when I was growing up, it never would have occurred to my parents to listen to Adam Ant. Well, it shouldn't have occurred to me either, but it did. So, but my question is what they probably would have referred to on the Brady Bunch, the generation gap. Is it over? Is it gone?
That's a very good question. It actually relates to a whole bunch of things. Okay, she's asking is the idea of the generation gap. That was a very popular thing to hear people talk about in the past because there was a huge schism that happened with the growth of rock and roll, in the sense that kids, the most important thing to a lot of kids in the 60s was like the Beatles, and their parents had no frame of reference for that. There was no relationship whatsoever. And now it's very different. Now, there's probably some kids in here, it's possible, that your favorite band and your parents' favorite band is both U2. That's a really interesting thing to me, right? First thing I'm here to talk about, I think, is the kind of changes in cultural memory. I think this has been a factor in why things like the generation gaps either cease to exist or change dramatically. Who here has seen the movie Back to the Future? Yeah. Wow! I guess that movie is very popular. Okay. There's a scene late in that movie where Michael J. Fox is going to perform music. He's going to perform music at this dance. And he plays Johnny Be Good by Chuck Berry. And he's going to play his guitar, and he goes, I think he's left-handed. He's going to play the guitar, and he says, this is an oldie, or I should say, this is an oldie from where I come from. And he plays the song, and then there's a funny little scene where Chuck Berry's cousin is supposedly there, and he plays it over the phone. Here's what I think is really interesting now. The length between Back to the Future and Chuck Berry's release of that song is now less than the gap between the movie Back to the Future and now. Okay? It's very interesting. We would never think of Back to the Future as an oldie, as a movie, right? Seems like a relatively modern movie. And yet when he's talking about, at the time already, in 1983, Chuck Berry songs seem very distant. So there seems to be one thing that is changing, which is the amount of time. I think one of the products of the acceleration of culture is that things seem less distant in the past. I mean, okay, does it seem weird for kids to be for anyone to be into Nirvana now, right? To be into Nevermind. That was 1991, okay? So that's, 17 years ago? 18 years ago? Okay. It was much stranger in 1991 for a teenager to be into Peter Frampton. Okay. There were examples of that, but it was less. Somehow, time is feeling different to people. And I think partially it's because of the number of ways we have to consume media. It's much easier to discover things from the past than it would have been for you to, say, discover your parents' music. The other thing is that generation gaps, or sort of chasms between groups of people, are based on the idea that there's something that they don't understand about the new thing the person likes. That the difference maybe between your parents and you with rock music is it sounded dissonant to them. It didn't even really sound like music, perhaps, to them. It just sounded like a version of music that somehow seemed less sophisticated and more abrasive than the music they liked. Okay? That's not going to happen now with young people whose parents were born, after the year 1950 or whatever. They're not going to feel as though that the thing that their kid is interested in is in any way distancing from them. So the generation gap now, and I'm not the first person to come up with this, seems to be a difference in what is personal and what is private, as opposed to the way it was in the past. Here's something, I'll just ask this question here. I love asking this question, I'm always curious. Raise your hand if you know someone who has a nude or partially nude photograph of themselves on the internet. I would say, call it 15%. There's some people who didn't raise their hand because it's them, The idea of when I was, I seem old now, I'm 36, but I went to school in the early 90s. There wasn't, not only was there not really a medium for that, but just the idea of allowing someone to photograph you naked was much more rare. It seemed to say more about who you were. It said something that you were interested kind of in things that were very unconventional romantically, Now it's not like that. Now that's one thing that has changed. It's no longer weird. There's probably, for all the people in this room, nobody here is not going to get a job because someone finds a nude photograph of you on the internet. Not going to happen unless you run for president maybe or something. For the most part, though, the idea of someone seeing that kind of image is more acceptable. So that might be this new generation gap. It's probably based on the internet, and it might even be, even in a larger sense, just the understanding of what the potential of the internet is as opposed to how it seems right now. There was a writer named Douglas Rushkoff who wrote a bunch of books about technology, and he made a really great point about how Ataris and televisions and the early Nintendos, how those things were just kind of seen as games. They really probably were, they're probably the main reason why you have no problem learning things on the computer and your parents or your grandparents might. It was very normal for you to be downstairs in the basement playing in television or playing Atari or playing Nintendo and manipulating what was on screen. Okay? You were actually manipulating the action of what you were seeing. For people older than you, they were upstairs, watching Hill Street Blues or whatever, and they were under the impression that what they saw on a screen was static. It was inflexible. It was a one-way relationship. What was on television is what they consumed. But once you're comfortable with the idea of being able to create the images on the screen, everything else seems normal, the generation gap you're talking about, maybe with your son might be, you probably also, if you like explosions in the sky, you're probably into new music more than even most 44-year-olds. So maybe you've been aware of these things. But if there is going to be a new generation gap, it's going to be technology-based as opposed to art-based.